Hi there, I'm Ben from Proton, the CRM built for distributors, and you're listening to In the Mind of a Distributor. This isn't your average podcast. Every time we hit record, our entire company is listening. That's because we believe the best way to build great software is to deeply understand the industry we serve. So each month, I sit down with the smartest minds in distribution to talk about what's working, what's not, and where the industry is headed. We didn't want to keep these insights to ourselves, so we're bringing them to you. Let's get into it. Our guest today is Joyce Lansdale, Vice President of Enterprise Business Development at Vallen and the Chairman of the Industrial Supply Association Board of Directors. A 25-year Vallen veteran, she's been in distribution for more than 30 years, bringing deep industry expertise and leadership. Vallen is a powerhouse in the industrial distribution industry. With over 150 years in the game, they've grown to 5,000 employees across 19 countries, bringing in over $3 billion a year in revenue. Today with Joyce, we're diving into selling to large enterprise customers, everything from value prop to resources and challenges. I can't think of a better person to cover this topic with. In 5 words or less, can you tell us what makes Vallen unique? And I'm guessing it has to do with the global footprint and the way you serve large customers.
Well, there's more. I would need more than 5 words to describe that.
Okay. All right.
So
10 words.
So innovation, proven, value, grit, people, right? And if you look at our tagline, you're going to see all of those elements are present because really our people do make the difference. And innovation, we're continuing to invest in and create more solutions for our customers through innovation that eventually proves the value to that customer so that they want more from us, right? They keep coming back for more. Customers don't hire us because we have the best price. Customers hire us because we have the best value.
Okay, so today you co-lead the business development team. You work with your husband. I have to ask, you guys have worked together now for a number of years. Any sort of lessons you can share with everyone else about how to have an amazing marriage and also work with your spouse?
We worked together before we were married, so we kind of knew what to expect. I mean, we were associates for a long period of time before we were actually married. So it's actually easy. Somehow our brains work very similarly. We look at 3 different variables and we come up with the same answer. Not everybody can do that. And we often come up with the same answer at exactly the same time. And we say the exact same thing at the same time. So it's kind of easy to plug and play with us. We do co-manage the team. I mean, the majority of the team reports to Jim. They're all out selling. I've got the sales enablement piece and some of the selling. It's really, we work very well together. And, I think the big thing that I've learned in the last year working with him is when to take a step back and when to take a step forward, right? You can't always be the boss. And he kind of realized that long before I did, right? He learned when to take a step back long before I did. And so it was a good lesson on, okay, now it's my turn to pause and listen.
Awesome. Well, let's pivot into the main topic for the day, which is really talking about winning national and enterprise accounts, which is something that Vallen does better than the rest. And so we'll do this in a few different sections, but the first is really around sort of what do enterprise customers actually want? When a large enterprise customer is sort of evaluating a partner and a distributor like Vallen, what are the top 3 or 4 things that they really, really care about when they're thinking about who to partner with?
One of the big things that they care about today is slow and obsolete inventory. And the pandemic really set them up for the situation that they're in today when it comes to slow and obsolete inventory. They've got a lot of it, right? They bought too much of it back then just in case they had supply chain issues. And so how to manage inventory more effectively and efficiently is a very big concern of a large enterprise customer and visibility to where those widgets sit, right? Then there is reliability. They want a solution that they can rely on that is going to be here. We spend collectively a lot of time creating these models and these solutions. Then we spend a lot of time implementing them and getting them up out of the ground. And it takes a lot of time and money. And so when you invest a lot in a solution, you need a period of time to get that return on that investment. You don't want to, have to plug and play something new every month, every year, every couple of years, right? And so that flywheel really gets going after several years of a program being implemented. So first thing was inventory. Second thing was reliability. And then the third thing is really having a fair total cost of ownership, right? So it's not just about the piece price of the product, but it's the entire solution altogether. And is it fair in terms of economic value, right? It might not be the cheapest, but it needs to be reliable and it needs to yield all the results, all the goals that they're trying to achieve.
So when you talk to customers, do you have to teach them about total cost of ownership, or is it obvious to most buyers at that level? I mean, we've heard from some distributors like, hey, if you're selling to small customers, like piece price is really like how a lot of people think, and it takes a lot of training on the customer side to really understand that that's not how to think about the relationship with the distributor. So I'm curious your experience there.
Yeah. So the more sophisticated the customer, the more sophisticated the corporate procurement organization, the more they understand total cost of ownership. And there's always some element of education associated with it. But we generally have to help them understand, what are the elements associated with the managing their indirect spend. It's not just the acquisition price of the widget. It's all of that work that goes into acquiring that widget, right? And what we try to uncover for our customer is how much redundancy exists in their supply chain management, in their operations. So if you think about it at a corporate level, right, there's an individual or a team that are coming up with these agreements that, they're trying to drive their spend to approved distributors, suppliers, integrator, whatever the case may be. And then you have people on the factory floor that are used to doing something a certain way. And depending on what they do or how they do it and what amount of autonomy they have, that becomes a challenge, right? Those individuals at the factory floor making independent decisions can often derail a corporate procurement's supply chain initiatives.
And so how do you help the corporate procurement groups think through that challenge as a partner?
Yeah. So, it's really trying to take that optionality out of the factory floor guys' hands, right? The inventory that they need needs to be present, like right in front of that customer on the factory floor. So if it's in their ERP system or on their punch out, or it's already sitting next to them, next to their workstation, it's in a vending machine, or it's in a VMI point of use cabinet, or it's in the storeroom, they don't even have to think about acquiring the widget. The widget's already there for them.
On reliability, the sort of obvious reliability value prop of every distributor is, if you order it and we say it's going to arrive on Monday, it arrives on Monday, and we have the right things in stock. It strikes me that Vallen offers like quite a bit more than just reliability to enterprise customers. I think at some point someone told me a story about you guys procuring a fire truck for a customer. I'm actually not sure if that's true, but to me it strikes me that enterprise customers want something more when it comes to reliability than just like, if you say it's going to be delivered on Monday, it gets delivered on Monday. That's like a whole other level of reliable service. So we'd just love to understand that a little bit more.
So the fire truck story, there was a period of time where we had what was called the U.S. Communities contract. So it's a government contract, and they would call us to buy whatever it was that they need. So they needed a fire truck. During hurricanes, we have customers that needed boats so that they could move stuff around, right? Drive down the river or across the Gulf. So when you think about indirect spend, right, there's the known quantities. There's the stuff that they buy over and over and over again, right? Consumables. And then you have things that you don't know that you're going to need. Those are spot buys, right? All of a sudden you need a widget that's not sitting on the shelf. It's not in your vending solution. It's not in your VMI solution. So from a reliability perspective, you go to somebody that you know that can find that widget for you. A significant portion of what we sell to our customers are these spot buy things, are these, not everyday widgets. It's the random things that they might need. Picnic tables, microwave ovens, dishwashers, things that are not necessarily present on our shelf, but we know where to get them, how to get them, and how to get them to the customer. So from a customer's perspective, all they have to do is call us. They don't have to go shop it, right? And when they have an enterprise contract with us, there's pricing terms that are already present that dictate what the customer is going to pay for us to acquire that dishwasher or microwave or picnic table for them. But there's more than just being able to get them the product that they want, when they want it, where they want it, how they want it, at the price they want it. There's also this whole cybersecurity thing. I was just on a call with a customer earlier this week, and before we could even get past go, they had a lot of questions on cybersecurity, because our computer and their computer, at some point in time, we hope are going to be married. And what we don't want, nobody wants, right, is for the bad guys to get in there and do bad things. So it's more than just the product, right? It's making sure that our systems are reliable, making sure that our systems have fail safes in them. In the event of some kind of crazy, catastrophe from a weather perspective, right? Do we have redundant systems so that if, server A goes down, server B is going to kick in? Protection of their data, protection of their intellectual property. Then you also have just regular visibility to data, right? So many customers have no clue what they buy, how much they pay for it, how they get it. And our customers rely on us to help them understand what they buy, what frequency they buy it, where it's going, how much of it is going there, what they paid for it, what that rotation looks like, right? And then they want us to be able to help them predict in the future how much are they going to need, because past history generally is a precursor to future performance.
What do most distributors who are not really experts in the enterprise think that enterprise customers need, but they actually don't need?
Or want. And that is the cheapest price. So it's not just a distributor thing, it's a sales guy thing too, right? I mean, sales guys, distributors, all of us in this business, we get sometimes hung up on it has to be the cheapest price. And cheap doesn't necessarily equate to good quality or reliability, right? And if you want the cheapest widget that you can possibly get, probably not going to be buying it from us. You'll probably be buying it from some web solution. And there's not going to be a warranty associated with it, and it might not work, and it might blow up something. And, we don't want to have anything to do with that.
As you guys think about sort of putting together these total cost of ownership models for customers, how do you measure those sort of intangible factors outside of, obviously, you can measure piece price, that's easy. You can probably measure sort of time savings. I mean, the idea that you have a partner that you could call up and say, I need a fire truck. And then, on some timetable, you get a fire truck. That has some value, but it's potentially harder to quantify. So how do you think about sort of mapping that out for customers?
So we use a proprietary software. Now, this is not a new innovation for us. We've been doing this for decades. And the software has been updated and changed and modified over the course of many decades. But we use a cost savings software called Value Plus. And as we do business with a customer, as we bring value to them, we document that in this system so that we can remind them of all these good things that we do for them. During a quarterly business review or an annual business review, as we're reviewing their scorecard and their KPIs, we're also talking about their Value Plus scores, right? And we can walk them through, we bought you a fire truck, we bought you a boat, but if we're doing all the work to source and acquire and deliver fire truck, and they didn't have to do that, we generally are going to agree on a value of that. So I don't know how much a fire truck costs. It's thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of maybe millions of dollars. But if we did it and they didn't have to do that work, right, there's a value there.
Yeah, got it. So it sort of incrementally accrues over the relationship.
When we talk to a customer about the tenure of our relationship and the value of our relationship over time, we can often look back over 5 years or 10 years and come up with an incredible number. We're generally saving at minimum for our customers 5% year after year after year of their total spend. But in some instances, we have years where we're saving 10% of their spend or even 20% of their spend. And I mentioned earlier that the longer the relationship goes, that flywheel continues to develop. The first several years of a relationship are generally like double-digit savings, right? When they move from whoever they had before to us, and we're able to document how much more value they're getting out of this relationship.
It strikes me that the most value would come from changing the behavior of the frontline people that are ordering things willy-nilly. That seems like the biggest opportunity. So
Yeah, and that requires, in order to do that effectively, right, that requires both sides of the relationship to be invested in documenting that, because they have to have a benchmark from their previous state. We can absolutely help them with their current state once they hire us, but like I don't know what they did before, like, as much, unless they have data to prove it, right?
So in terms of sort of selling to the enterprise, want to move into talking a little bit more about sort of sales cycle, sales process. What does the sales cycle look like to win one of these really large customers? Is it sort of an RFP process? And maybe you can tell like a specific story about a customer that you guys recently won.
So the sales cycle may or may not include an RFP or an RFQ, but each individual selling opportunity is going to be different. Each customer is going to have, different nuances. And, generally it is the larger the spend, the longer the sales cycle. The bigger the change, right? So current state versus future state, the disruption to the status quo, the more you're disrupting the status quo, the guys on the factory floor that are buying stuff today that aren't going to be allowed to buy the stuff tomorrow, that's a huge disruption. That's a long sell cycle, right? If it's a lift and shift and it's a quick sell cycle, it's easy to win, but it's easy to lose as well. Then you get consultants added into the mix. So often in this space, our customers, Fortune 500 manufacturers in America or globally, they often engage with a consultant. They're outsourcing some of the supply chain activity, or at least the RFQ process. And then you get into conflicting goals, right? The people that hired the consultant, there's interpretation between the two of them. So what the consultant is trying to achieve is aligned with what the manufacturer, the customer is trying to achieve, but often there is a little bit of tension in between the two of them. And it's generally around how much savings that consultant can drive. And that savings is generally on paper. So during an RFQ, right, the consultant driving the RFQ is going to say, this deal that you're getting from X, Y, or Z distributor is the most competitive, because they often just piece price becomes very important. And that becomes problematic.
Right. So are the consultants actually helpful for the customer or not really?
What often happens is it looks good on paper. It's kind of like that Chevy Chase Christmas Vacation, the Jelly of the Month Club guy. What looks good on paper isn't reality. It isn't good in practicality. So what often happens is they say that this deal is great because you get these cheap prices on paper, and in reality, what they get is not what they signed up for. So they think they're going to be getting certain widgets, branded product. All of a sudden, they're getting something other than that. Right.
So what is it that they miss? They're too focused on piece price and they're not focused on some of the other stuff. But like, what are the biggest buckets that the consultants actually miss out on? Because it strikes me that like that's got to be part of your education process when you're selling, is educating the customer on how to think about total cost of ownership. What are the things the consultants miss?
They often miss out on the data piece. So their data that's in the customer's ERP system is often inaccurate. So what the ERP system says that they're buying and what's actually showing up on the factory floor or on the shelf isn't the same. Let's just pretend it's an Ansel glove and it's part number ABC123. It's what it says in the ERP system. That's a premium product. What actually is being used in practice is something different.
How does that happen?
It requires material management maintenance on the part of the customer, on the part of the end user customer, right? So generally, they're managing SAP using an SAP system or an Oracle system to manage that spend, and it requires maintenance of the material master.
So in other words, one of the big values that you guys provide is that'll never happen again because we know what we're shipping to each of your locations, and we're the only one shipping stuff there, so you don't need to worry about it as much anymore.
And we have all the data to support it. audit that data and they can audit that supply chain. I mean, the whole path to procurement is like this big mystery for some customers. They don't really understand how they're getting the stuff that is being utilized at the end user at the factory floor level. So somehow these things are coming there. That's when all this optionality comes into play, right? So they're supposed to use this Ansel glove, and suddenly Billy at the factory floor, he decides he's going to have some new vending machines installed, and inside of those vending machines, it's not that Ansel glove anymore. It's some other product. And then the corporate procurement guys lose complete visibility to their spend, and all of their good intentions get derailed. And all the elements that are present in a national account contract just start to dissolve.
Right, because the decisions made by someone on the front lines who is not aware or necessarily tied into got it. And then the consultant comes in and they see the data that corporate sees without actually understanding. So during the sales process, is there some sort of like ingest or discovery that you guys do to get to the bottom of that, to help customers sort of see through the mist of their procurement mess?
Yeah. And and again, it depends on the customer. Some have a very rigid process and they think that process is bulletproof. But customers, as we're going down the path with the customer, we're helping them understand. So if during an RFQ, this is what generally sparks the conversation. We submit our quotation, everybody else submits their quotation, and there's these things called outliers. So they come back to us and they say, hey, you're too high on this product. You're like, everybody else is $1 and you're $1,000. I'm like, okay, it's probably a unit of measure issue. So let's rectify that. But first, somebody has to look at that data and look at it and realize that there's something wrong there, right? There's an anomaly there. So that takes a certain level of thought. And then when you have these outliers, right, then you're going through and okay, if it's not a unit of measure issue, then what else is it? Then you get to the point where our seller said, okay, let's go to the shelf and see what are you actually using? Because this item that I'm quoting you, I mean, here's my cost, here's my sell, this widget, and then you're buying something significantly cheaper, but there's no way I can get to that price. So let's go.
It's not the same product.
It's not the same product.
Do they ever come back to you and say, there's an anomaly, you're way cheaper than everybody else?
Never.
Shocking.
Never. And they should, because if we're way cheaper than somebody else, we're probably quoting the wrong product. And so if they say, yay, we want to buy that, cheap product from you, and then we sell them whatever the widget is, and then they go, well, this isn't what we wanted, but this is what your part number says. Well, in practicality, again, right, reverse engineer it, the data's wrong.
So once you go through this sort of intake process, you find these anomalies. What happens next? Like, who are the stakeholders that need to be involved in sort of partnering with Vallen at this sort of enterprise scale? What happens now? You figured out, okay, here's sort of what the total cost of ownership estimate is. Here's what we think we can save you. We've done this sort of work. Hopefully no consultants are involved. Now what?
So from a customer perspective, it's generally the corporate procurement folks that are involved. Depending on the type of business, often there's safety folks that are involved, EH&S folks, material management folks. Often finance is involved because they need to approve. Sometimes there's a capital outlay required, but it generally goes to legal. So legal then gets involved. And then once everybody has a nice, kumbaya over a contract, then it just goes to implementation. Then you get into some other fun things, right? So it depends on if you're disrupting status quo or and regardless of what you're doing, there is some disruption to status quo, right? Because Billy at the factory floor isn't going to be getting his widgets from XYZ distributor anymore. You're going to be getting them from Vallen. He doesn't know Vallen, never heard of you. I don't know you. You don't have an office or a warehouse across the street from me. They get all freaked out. And so you have to kind of resell Billy all over again. And that becomes problematic, right? Because if Billy has a say in the whole situation, then we have to bring Billy along as well.
And so who does that part of the selling? Is that your team, or does that happen after your team gets the implementation contract? Then the people that are actually going and doing the implementation sort of site by site are doing that selling?
Yeah, all the above. It takes a village, right? So, we hope that our business development person has a great relationship with the corporate guy, and they're going to talk about, hey, Billy's giving us some trouble down here. The corporate guy is going to go to plant manager and say, hey, you got to get Billy in line. And then our business development guy is going to talk to our sales guy at the site level. And he's going to say, hey, Joyce, you need to go talk to Billy and make friends with him. So plant manager talks to Billy. Joyce, the sales rep, talks to Billy. We introduce our inside sales team to Billy. We've got leadership people that might talk to Billy. We've got our VMI people that might talk to Billy, right? So we make friends with Billy. But of course, that takes time.
I'm curious to sort of flip around to the other side, which is, actually making this real for a customer requires like tons of resources to be pulled from across Vallen, right? So once you actually sell one of these deals, you've got to be able to, live up to the promise. How do you sort of coordinate and work during the sales cycle and after the sales cycle with all the various parts of Vallen to make it happen for customers?
But to really answer your question, it's coordination across the entire enterprise. So it takes a village to sell a deal. It takes a village to implement a deal. And it takes a village to take care of a customer long term, right? Our customers have access to a wealth of resources inside of Vallen. So when it comes to the selling of the actual opportunity with our business development team, the business development guy or girl is quarterbacking that opportunity. And he or she has the resources of the sales enablement team behind them. So from the RFQ preparation, then we pull in the quoting and sourcing team. They're managing the market basket. They're doing the special pricing agreements. They're going out to the manufacturers and obtaining cost. We have our solutions design team. They're going to go on site at a customer and they're going to document that current state and look at what are you doing? How are you doing this work today, Mr. Customer? And we're going to craft the solution that we believe is optimal for that customer. And that's part of what we're going to sell to that customer so that after they sign on the dotted line, we're going to then implement that future state for them, which pulls into the implementation team. But before we get to the implementation team, we have our legal department, right? So as we get down that sales cycle road and we've got a contract that we're working on in conjunction with that customer, our legal department's part of that conversation and that negotiation. And then once we get them all signed up on the dotted line, then it goes to our implementation team. And that implementation team is going to go on site and they're going to spend time working with Billy or the other Billies and taking their old solution and re-engineering it with the new solution. And that might entail some of our vending and VMI people. If there's a vending solution, we have our FPS team. If it's a VMI solution, we have our VMI team. But ultimately, and then it goes to operations that it's going to manage it from a day-to-day perspective going forward, either on the industrial line of business or on the integrated supply line of business.
So much complexity. It's amazing that you guys are able to do this at scale. So pivoting to sort of the last pillar of what it takes to sell enterprise is really the sales team. And so what I really want to focus on here is the sales process that you've described is incredibly complex and requires someone who can really, follow through on a strategic sale beyond just, hey, we've got a cheaper piece price. So what are the things that you look for when you're interviewing salespeople to know, yep, they're going to be able to handle this kind of strategic sale?
They need to be generally experienced, somebody who has been a field salesperson, somebody who has been maybe in leadership. They understand the elements of the cost to serve, right? So it's not just I buy it and I sell it and I make margin on it, but you need to understand all the elements that go into, those acquisition elements that the widget costs $1, but all the other things that you have to do in order to get the widget to the factory floor costs more than $1 potentially. So having some P&L or cost to serve understanding, it's generally experience, right? So, and if you know how to build our watch, you're going to be better at telling that story. We like to hire from within. We like to hire people who, have a proven track record of success organizationally. But generally, besides all those important things, they have to be able to talk. Maybe it's a thing about the 20-year-olds right now, but they're used to they're used to their phone, right? They're used to doing everything here. Well, you have to get out of here and you have to come here and be able to speak to a human being about the stuff that.
Well, it goes back to the sales fundamentals that you learned in your first sales, which is you get in the car and you visit the damn customer.
And then you have to get out of the car, right?
Right. That's right. A critical step is getting out of the car and going and talking to people you don't know.
Show up. It is huge, right? But point is, you have to speak, you have to be able to articulate your value proposition and help that customer understand, what is it that you sell. If it's white foam and that's all that there is to it, then why should they buy your white foam? If it's total cost of ownership and reliability and supply chain management, right? You have to create that FOMO, that if they don't buy it from Vallen, right, what are they leaving on the table? What are they missing out on? And creating that vision of what could my life be like if I give this business to Vallen? My life is going to be so much better if I don't have to worry about buying that fire truck anymore.
We often hear from distributors, I really want my sales team to be more strategic. And what you just said is, and from this whole conversation, you have crisply defined what your strategic value is to customers, and you've enabled your sales team to go sell that, but you've explained to them what the value is. I think that is a step that I feel like a lot of our customers miss.
Yeah, and part of what our team does, not only from a business development perspective, right, on the front side of a sale, but on the day-to-day operational side of the sale, it's continuing to remind that customer why they hired Vallen to take care of them, right, through value plus cost savings, through quarterly business reviews, right, through reporting, all of the things that you're supposed to do to continue to tend to your garden, to help your garden grow, right? You need to give it sunshine. You need to give it fertilizer. You need to give it water. If you just set it and forget it and they never see you again, probably going to get fired.
So just one final thing here, at Proton, we really, really value curiosity and continuous learning. And so I'm curious, you've been in distribution a really long time, but what's one thing that you feel like you still don't have a good answer for, or you're still trying to figure out or trying to learn?
Free. How anybody thinks something is free. And I hear it all the time. Well, they're going to give me those fill in the blank for free. I don't know anything that's free. I mean, even the air's not free anymore. I have a thing in my office here to, get rid of the bad stuff, right? A filter, an air filter. The water's not free. The air's not free. Nothing's free. So how do you why on God's green earth would anybody think that something is free? It's not free.
I love it. That's awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. This was really fantastic. I learned a ton about how to sell to large customers and really appreciate you doing this. So thanks again, Joyce.
You bet. Anything I can do to help you, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
That's it for this episode of In the Mind of a Distributor. If you like this conversation, leave a review. It helps more folks in distribution find the show. If you're thinking about a CRM for your business, head to proton.ai to see how Proton can help you grow faster. Or if you want to connect with me, you can add me, Benj Cohen, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.